Yeah, the panel we were just in, I mean, frankly, it was absolutely fascinating. If you don't know Chris Dahl, he's with Verde Labs, which, in my opinion, is one of the most reputable cannabis labs in the entire United States, because they actually will tell you in your testing, like, we see unknown isomers in here that we can't identify, and therefore we can't comment on their toxicity. And he was, very frank upstairs. He's losing a lot of customers due to that. But he's always been an industry leader. I'll never forget in 2018, 2019, when they sent an email out saying, obviously, we're not going to identify the specific brands, but we're seeing a vast increase in an industrial solvent being used for extraction, and it was paint thinner. People are using paint thinner in their garages to convert CBD into THC. They're doing isomerization in the garage. So the fact he just put out, and Susan and I looked at each other like, this is insane. He said, nearly all of the products on the market that he's seeing right now have 30 to 40% synthetic byproducts that no chemist in this country can identify right now. They can look at it. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it does within the body. And it's because some of these, what we would term kind of semi-synthetics or full synthetics, are being created in people's garages with things like battery acid. That's an industry problem that we all need to address. It's difficult for me when I see, for example, there were a lot of people who came up to testify before the legislature in this last session, and so many people sat there in front of our legislature and said, Delta-8 only comes from the plant. It's completely natural. If you're in this industry, you know that there is not enough commercially viable, extractable quantities of Delta-8 in that plant, and that's not what anyone is doing. But people sat there and told our legislature that. How much trust do they have in the industry when they're hearing that, and then they have someone, like Susan, who sat down and made them a chart saying that's not true. If we can't start on the baseline of a candid conversation and really say, we have some really bad actors in this industry, we all need to get on the same page about what we need to do to clean it up. Otherwise, you get prohibitionists like Dan Patrick throwing cereal in your face on TV saying, you want to eat this?
Moment that was. Oh my goodness. So thinking about regulatory integration. So we are about to see some changes with the integration of TABC coming into the fold when it comes to hemp products. We already see DSHS and DPS working together on the teacup side. Of course, in addition to what TABC is doing now, which is enforcing age restriction in places they already regulate. So places that sell alcohol that also sell hemp products, TABC is regulating them to make sure they're enforcing age restrictions. But TABC is about to be doing a whole lot more. Let's talk about the memorandum of understanding that is to be, that we haven't seen, what the timeline is and what it looks like for these agencies to start working together.
I'm not advised what the exact timeline is, and I suspect neither is TABC. And I know the discussions have been taking place. The parameters or the outline is laid out in Governor Abbott's executive order. And I just say, whenever I'm trying to deal with the government or with any audience, I try to get inside that audience's head. What is their world like? How do they think? And, like DPS, as I'm fond of saying, they're a bunch of cops. They don't do science. They don't do business. They're the wrong place for teacup to be regulated. It's just not who they are. And they constantly make silly mistakes out of not even if I'm not even sure if there's malice or not. It's just not how they think. Dishes, every agency has its own culture. And I can't say how pleased I've been seeing the modern day culture of TABC. It's not always been that way as an agency, but it has really great leadership now. They're all about, hey, we're all on the same team. We want good actors. Good actors talk to us. Pay your taxes, follow the rules, and we're cool, and we want you to succeed.
Love seeing their communication, stakeholder meetings regularly.
They're open, more open.
Yeah.
Than dishes, and dishes is a lot more open than DPS. And agencies do not naturally talk to each other. They live in silos unless they're forced to talk to each other.
And even then, they necessarily don't do so. The DPS and dishes communicating on pulmonary is...
Oh, well, communicating at all. I mean, in one of I was the public representative on DPS's ill-fated working group to advise them on medical cannabis. And in the very first meeting, the staffer who was then running Teacup sat down and cheerfully told us that she had just made contact with dishes and they're going to talk some more. And I was like, what? And I said out loud, because often I don't have a filter, wait, you just now started talking to them? Yeah, isn't that great? And I'm like, It's been 5 years since this law passed to help in regulating this. When you meet in 5 meetings, and when I kept bugging them, when are you going to invite dishes to join these meetings? And that never happened. They really have to be forced. So I'd like to see legislation forcing a standing cannabis roundtable of agency representatives with some specialists on it, scientists, doctor, we gotta have a lab testing guy, so that the communication is ongoing. And it will take passing a freaking law to make that happen on a regular basis, just because of their very nature.
Particularly for DPS, it's very insulated with the teacup program. If you read the chat yesterday, you heard about the slew of unwritten regulations that even lawyers are wholly unaware of, unless you are one of the lawyers who directly represents one of our dispensing organizations.
You can't look them up anywhere. Nope. You have to call Chelsie.
They're in my head.
Yeah.
Other states, you get around. What do you see as far as collaboration in other states that we could clarify?
Colorado has been phenomenal. That task force that I've mentioned repeatedly also had the Marijuana Enforcement Division, as well as CDPHE, which is Colorado Department of Public Health. Med obviously oversees marijuana. CDPHE oversees hemp. They were in every meeting taking notes. I would have figured at certain points they either fall asleep or their eyes would glaze over. This is over 100 hours of meetings, and they were there. And some of the responses or questions that we got back showed real thought, like very
engagement.
Really impressive amounts of engagement. They're always there if we have questions. I've always kind of had an adversarial relationship with regulators, and that's not the case there, because they want you to succeed, they want you to work, and they're willing to give you some grace to get there, even if you're on the wrong side of where you should be. They'll work with you to get you compliant. So maybe some of the marijuana operators wouldn't agree with me on that, because I don't directly work with Med. I just know a lot of their people, but it's been impressive. And I think that kind of raises the question of why not just make its own regulatory agency for it, rather than try to shoehorn it into an existing one.
This has been a couple of sessions when I would say that idea around the Capitol. One of the responses I got, I can't remember if it was from a lobbyist or staffer, it was from a lobbyist. Now I'm remembering who sent this to me, but he sort of looked at me and said, there is no way Greg Abbott's ever going to allow there to be a building with a sign out front that says the Texas Cannabis Commission. And I mean, I think that was 2019.
Things have changed.
And I'll get into a little bit about Abbott World. When the law first passed to create Teacup, I had a dear friend who was a human services advisor at Abbott at the time, and later shared with me that after Abbott signed the bill creating Teacup, for the next year and a half, he would look up and just randomly shout at his staff, I can't believe I let y'all talk me into signing that marijuana bill. And they would kind of think, you mean the one that helps little kids with seizures? So, they do not say that to the boss. And he's gotten over that. And I don't know what happened. That was part of why I was so shocked with the veto. I mean, I wanted it desperately, but I didn't think it was going to happen. I called the same friend when I was trying to draft my hopefully brilliant letter urging him to veto, and asked him, help me with the spin. What's the tone here? How can this be effective? And what we came up with was talking it through together was, Greg Abbott hates weed, but he hates Dan Patrick more. And I think that was part of his impetus. I now also think it's very much to pivot to why the veto happened. And this came up in the talk with the journalist. It's the ubiquity of the product, and lots of nice, middle-aged or 65 and up Republican ladies like their gummies, and they talk to their husbands who work in politics about it. And they that the secretary at the bank I was talking to, it's that popular, and particularly why there are good high quality products that helps us. If we have some of these terrifying things that Chelsie and I just heard hurt some people in Texas, that's going to hurt us.
One, and so there's going to be accountability for things like that come along the way, and there needs to be. We've had a lack of enforcement, so there's a lot of stuff on the shelves that maybe shouldn't be on the shelves.
Yeah.
And once we start seeing those headlines, how are we going to avoid it then people categorizing all of the industry that way?
That's going to be incredibly difficult because even the, PhDs who are sitting there in analytical chemistry are saying, like, at a molecular level, have a lot of difficulty. They said, even with the reputable operators, they've been able to get it down to about 1% to 0.5% of synthetic byproduct that they don't know what it is and don't know what it does. But there is absolutely no way, that a consumer sitting in front of a shelf faced with 30 different gummy brands has any clue what the source material was, what the testing parameters were. So if we don't at the state level adopt some form of accountability in our regulations, and I really like the traceability propositions. I mean, that's standard for every food product in the United States. CGMP regulations and everybody, I heard somebody on a panel say yesterday, well, but the people who are making these are white labeling it. How are they going to know? Well, federal law has something called own label distributor and CGMP regulations in both food, cosmetics, and dietary supplements that puts the entire onus of the supply chain on that own label distributor. You're the one selling it, and you assuredly should know what is going into these products. And they require traceability down to a component ingredient level. You have to be able to prove the purity, the quality, the source material that goes into every single component of that product. And there's a reason for that, because in the event that there is an adverse reaction, the FDA can immediately go into that manufacturing facility and say, what batch lot did it come from? What date was this run? It's specifically stamped. Then they can start getting into the minutia of those records and say, well, we know that it's this particular component ingredient that's the problem. And then they can go to that component manufacturer and say, how many people did you get this to? Because we need to do an immediate nationwide recall. We can't do that right now in the hemp industry.
Yeah, the Chipotle example comes to mind. People got sick at Chipotle and they were able to very quickly determine it was the romaine lettuce from a particular farm.
Yep.
Every food, every supplement right now is regulated by the FDA. Everybody should be following it right now.
And state medical cannabis requires this of medical cannabis.
And I'll tell you one thing that I've learned in the past, 7 years in this job. You can have all the regulation you want in the world without enforcement doesn't mean squat. And
Yep.
In fact, it actually hurts the good operators because now we're taking on capital expenses to follow the law. These other folks don't. They're making greater margin over time. The balance shifts in a real meaningful way. And I think that's the best way to characterize the hemp industry. It's been a godsend for cannabis acceptance and the movement and all that. But at the same time, I think you can characterize it in a lot of ways as a race to the bottom for a lot of these operators. And that is where all the problems are coming from. Those are the examples that our politicians and the chief of police in Allen get up and go, see, this looks like Skittles. This looks like a child's candy, trademark infringement, adulteration, misbranding. It's hard to argue against that. And that's what we're all trying to get out of here, get out of the industry as well, because we know there's going to be a backlash to it, and we're seeing it now. And self-regulation, frankly, just hasn't worked yet. There's just too many bad actors out there. They'll pop up, smack one down, they pop up somewhere else. And frankly, at this point, some of them are even leading some of the biggest trade groups in the country. So,
Yes.
Yep.
And they're the loudest voices,
Oh, yeah.
both at the Capitol and here at the Texas legislature. And it's such hubris. They don't realize they're doing more harm than good 99% of the time. But I also take a lot of exception with consumers in this industry who show up at these conferences who know these things. And if you walk into a store and see these products, say something. Say, why in the world are you selling some Stonios over here? That looks exactly like a Oreo cookie pouch. And, I got a 16-year-old kid. I don't, I'm using this as an example. Mine's 4, so hopefully he's not out buying Stonios. But I mean, this is a real legitimate concern with parents around the state of Texas. There have been several undercover sting operations. They sent a 14-year-old, and that 14-year-old was able to purchase highly concentrated vape products. Like, nobody here in the state of Texas should be proud of that. And the reason we get such pushback and the push toward prohibition is that when session starts, these stores, these giant billboards you see in Houston that say, get your medical marijuana card here from a hemp store that is not a licensed medical marijuana operator.
And you don't have marijuana cards in Texas.
And they get the pictures of these. It goes straight to those senators' desks. So when they're seeing, it doesn't matter if 500 people come and sit in front of the legislature and say, this is a great industry. We're good operators. This isn't the reality here. That they realize that is the reality, because again, they got a whole dossier sitting on their desk showing them these things. So I think the industry itself needs to be a lot better about calling out the bad actors. For some reason, we have this, I know lawyers and some of the policymakers, and we call it out, but call yourselves out. If you have a store down the road, say something.
Well, and that discussion makes me think of Representative Darby's comments. Representative Darby is part of a group of the leadership in House who pushed to regulate this instead of ban it because of what he heard at the House hearing on the State Affairs Committee, House State Affairs Committee during the regular session. At the same time, he clearly is uncomfortable with there being 30 plus stores in San Angelo, which is a town of, I think they're at 90,000 people now. That's a lot. So that saturation, that visual starts making the politicians uncomfortable.
Yeah, driving around all over Austin and seeing, Uncle Bud's van, just marijuana leaves plastered everywhere. I don't know that helps. Right. At the same time, it's hard to say you guys are wrong, but then you go and meet with some of these conservatives, and that's what they bring up. Like they're in Austin, and every time they look out the window or walk across the street, there's another van's will deliver you stuff, or buy your flower here. And it should be like that in a regulated, industry. I hope we get there someday, but maybe this ain't the right way to do it right now.
Yeah. Sweet Cincy store at 6th and Congress is a really nice looking store. But
It's been converted to a
wanted
Walmart.
to stab myself when they had a plant in the front window when it's $6.
I thought it was cool.
I don't know, but it doesn't help me get bills passed.
Yeah, y'all have to understand we are being critical, but also we are the very people who help lobby. So, Susan is one of the primary lobbyists in this industry. I wrote HB 46, the medical bill. I wrote some of the beverage fix bill that failed. We interface with these senators and representatives, daily during session, and we're the ones who hear, we're trying to tell them, like, this is a legitimate industry. There are good actors out there. This is what we need. And then they're going to pull up a photo of, well, here's this 750 milligram cereal bar that looks like Fruit Loops. And what am I supposed to say sitting there? I can say that's not representative of the entire industry, but when they have a staffer, and you guys should be aware, they all have staffers. So if you're a business owner and your name is on that list, you probably saw with Senator Perry, he came prepared with receipts. People were up there trying to tell him, this is how we operate compliantly. And I saw at least 3 operators where he pulled up a photo or a screenshot of their website and said, well, hold on, you're sitting here telling me X, and I saw this on your website. That doesn't help us remotely in trying to advance policy that doesn't result in a total ban here.
Yeah, I was in a meeting with the speaker's staff during session trying to push some envelope when I realized within a week, and I'll give you a little background behind the scenes. After that House hearing in the regular session, when we went into the hearing with a beverages only bill, within 24 hours, I was getting, okay, we want to regulate, but not flour, not this, not that. And it became this rapidly evolving situation that every time I spoke to the staff, they were willing to do more, and they were suggesting it. So I'm in a meeting, and having seen Nick's store, I was like, what? It would be okay if people consumed on site, maybe in a separate space from where you buy. Like, let's not prohibit that, because it's like a community. I'm doing this whole pitch. It's like a community gathering place. And the staffer looked at me and just deadpanned, that could fly, but Big Dan's weed van is out. And I died laughing by the way he said it, because the staffer had been out on 6th Street and seen the mobile spans, and that was just way a bridge too far for them to stomach.
I'll take lounges over vans.
Yeah.
Well, and getting back to the the accountability, and when the accountability starts rolling in, how are we going to handle that? And I think that we lean into it. I mean, the fact that people are having products taken off or licenses revoked is proof that the system is working, that the regulation is working to drive out bad actors and take bad product off the market. And so leaning into letting them know that this isn't proof that the cannabis industry doesn't deserve to exist. It's proof that the regulation and enforcement of that regulation actually works. And we're going to be seeing that. There's some parts of the rules that may or may not stand, and we certainly hope some of it doesn't. But there are other pieces like the recall procedures that are great. The
And traceability.
and traceability, that's right.
Age restrictions.
Hello, age restrictions. But the consumer complaints, which is adverse effect reporting, we've talked a lot about that. But there just isn't we're
It's not a good
tracking.
system.
And so how are we going to hold manufacturers accountable when they're distributing a bunch of bad products going out under different labels and we're not able to pinpoint where it actually came from?
Let's talk about methods of accountability and pain points and accuracy. Regulatory oversight, regular inspections. You're a store owner, you're open to the inspections. Maybe you get 95% of it right, 5 wrong. You work it out with the agency. And usually in those negotiations, it's go forth and send no more. Sometimes they might fine you a little bit, but that's very precise. And the pain on the business owner really isn't that great compared to a lawsuit, a personal injury lawsuit, because one of the scary, scary products that Chris was just describing upstairs that he's seen come through his lab really hurts someone. That's going to be back to what the press is interested in, a dramatic conflict story, a tragedy. It's all over the newspapers. And in lawsuits, it's not just one person gets sued. The plaintiff's lawyer will often try to think, okay, who else is on the supply chain? Store owner, distributor, manufacturer. Maybe they can't find the manufacturer who brought in the synthetic stuff from China, but one of the people in that chain is what business is doing well, so they're the deep pocket. So they end up bearing more of the brunt of the bad acts that are really from someone else. Litigation is a blunt, very expensive instrument. And then you also have criminal. To me, in my background, my training is an appellate lawyer. I write long briefs and argue to banks of judges of whether something is legal or not. And there's a lot of gray in the law right now. Do you want to be the company that has to pay the lawyers or the person who has to pay the lawyers to argue the gray in where it's criminal liability, going to jail instead of writing just money, which is a lot less painful?
And what Susan is saying about the downstream distribution, this is something I think our retail stores in Texas here are wholly unaware of. And as cannabis lawyers, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Texas has one of the single strongest consumer protection statutes in the entire United States.
Yes.
It's called the DTPA. It allows the consumer to recover treble damages if it's proven that it's willful, which is a fairly easy bar to get to. But more importantly, it's automatic recovery of attorney's fees. Why plaintiffs' attorneys haven't picked up on this and started suing some of these shops when people are having these adverse incidences or being fired from their jobs or because they've tested positive when it's not disclosed in something, beyond me. But what retail stores seem to be wholly unaware of, and I say this nearly every time I speak, is in products liability law, because there's an aggrieved party, the law lets that aggrieved party look to everyone in the downstream distribution stream, which, as Susan was saying, it can go back as far as the farmer that provided the extract. But the retail store is the first person to get sued because they need to sue that retail store to figure out who that manufacturer was, who the distributor was, who the middleman was, and then they'll start going after those guys. But generally, you as the retail store who either didn't vet this product or believed you had a good product and purchased
You
it
got
from
lied
an
to.
adverse event. Yeah, you may have been lied to. That happens a lot here. You're the first one on that lawsuit. And I've had 15 plus retail stores sued in products liability claims in this area. So far, they've been relegated to job loss. Somebody's picked up criminal violation, et cetera, et cetera. But it's coming when someone somewhere here in the state of Texas is going to have an adverse event from one of these products. And then the first products liability lawsuit gets filed. And then do you know what happens? We saw the first wrongful death lawsuit with Kratom settle out in the multi-million-dollar verdicts about a year and a half ago.
Out of Texas?
Not Texas. It was Florida and Washington State were the first two. But if you Google Kratom now, you know what the very first thing that's coming up? About 6 ads. Have you been wrongfully injured by Kratom? Call us today. And it's plaintiffs' attorneys because they saw those 2 nuclear verdicts. Now there are Kratom lawsuits filed. We have 5 of them we're defending right now. So it's coming for the hemp industry. And I don't think people realize this yet.
I've been real surprised to find out, not just on the threat of lawsuits, but navigating this very uncertain time that we're going through with legally, regulatorily, how few retailers have attorneys.
It's shocking.
It really is shocking. I mean, that'd be the first thing that I have to make sure that I'm walking this line very carefully and that I'm ready to go if I get raided or something happens.
Yeah, part of what we do is, I understand retail operations have smaller startup capital. And
Yes.
the first person in my family to go to law school, I didn't come from privilege. I grew up in a trailer house. I get it, people. So we offer a real short consultation that we do for retail stores at a reduced rate, where we just give them 30 minutes and say, like, for the love of God, just call us and we'll give you some decent risk mitigation tactics. Like, there was a store owner last week who they've been in the business 7 years. And I said, do you have signage saying, or is it on your receipt that, these products include THC and may result in drug test failure? Wasn't on the receipts in the store, wasn't on signage anywhere in the store. And I'm like, well, are you vetting your products? Because if it's coming from my manufacturers, that's darn sure on the back of it. And now I've had that codified in a couple of different states. And this was like news to them. And I said, what's going to happen if you don't fix this? Retired former principal who, unfortunately, because capitalistic America is now having to go drive an 18-wheeler in his golden years of retirement for Walmart, is going to take a drug test and he's going to test positive. And guess what? Here comes a demand letter to your store saying, didn't know. I had no clue that THC from hemp is the same thing as THC from cannabis. Not only did I lose my job, I lost my state secured pension. Pay me. Yeah.
And to be clear, this isn't just a Texas problem, because interstate trade, there's basically 3 states at this point that become the epicenter for these bad actors: Texas, Florida, and North Carolina. So you can regulate all you want here. Those operators in Florida and North Carolina are still going to be pumping that stuff into the state. So it really is incumbent on the retailers and the buyers to understand what they're buying, stock their shelves, appropriately, and kind of get away from this. There's a sense of willful ignorance amongst a lot of the industry, and kind of an unwillingness to educate yourselves of what you're supposed to be doing, how to do it properly.
Optimistic hopefulness. People open a business, they're learning, it's new to everyone, and it's very easy to get hoodwinked by the bad actors out there who are distributors or sketchy manufacturers.
I actually just emailed Susan a quote. I was saying we need to use this in session. There's a quote from the Oklahoma Attorney General. It was 96 million. Chris can tell you again. Go watch his panel on Zoom. Fascinating. But millions and millions of pounds of what should have been regulated cannabis is missing. And the Oklahoma Attorney General issued a statement saying it's us, it's Texas, it's all going to the black
market. This stuff, it wouldn't leave our state. Yeah.
I think now's a good time to open it up to questions to keep the conversation going with the direction of Texas. Questions you might have, ideas, thoughts.
Yeah, what should the state of Texas do going forward?
Yeah. Yes.
Chelsie, what's the best way to prepare clients for this idea of the hemp ban at the federal level? We talked about it at our last session. I'd be interested to know, you counsel a lot of folks in these businesses. How can they prepare for it if it's lights out?
I don't think that's an excellent question. It's a conversation I'm having routinely. I don't think it's going to be lights out, and here's why. There's basically 2 tracks going on federally right now. There's the pilot program that is assessing whether certain cannabinoid and THC-based formulations could qualify for, I won't get into the technical healthcare side of it, but basically qualify them for Medicare, Medicaid within certain caps and limitations. And that pilot program is being run by HSS, headed by the FDA. And we have a Texan in the scene there, Matt Zorn. He is Assistant Deputy General Counsel for RFK, is working hard on that. And then you have Congress, who right now is an absolute mess, from everything from the complete ban bill to the 3-year extension to arbitrary caps. About 2 years ago, we had really good support and conversations with several of the leading senators in this issue, Wyden, McConnell's office at that time, Booker's office. But because so many things are going on at the national political level right now, it's difficult to get the attention that is necessary. So this is the first time where and to be honest, Scott, this is the first time in my career I'm having to tell clients, like, at this stage, as of today, I couldn't begin to tell you where we're going. Now, I do think there is I don't want to say great hope. There is hope in the 3-year extension, because right now they're posturing that really appropriately so as a saving grace for the farmers because it's about a 90 to 120 day crop cycle. They're stating we need to get this passed. We need the momentum now because the farmers need to know, for those in moderate climates, obviously not Texas, but we need to know whether we need to start that. So I do think we'll know whether that 3-year extension bill will go forward as 3 years or be modified down within the next 60 days or so. So I'm telling everybody, kind of hang tight at this point. But other than that, it's, and again, in Alder Kenner, first time in my entire career where I'm telling people it's very difficult for me as your attorney to advise you on the pathway right now. Let's talk again in 30, 45 days.
Do you think they could go about it a different way? From what you're telling me, it may take them guys a little bit to determine to split a cannabinoid, because y'all are up here saying that they need to have this percentage here, whatever. Can't they just say and go a totally different direction and say, okay, we're going to say these are synthetics and put them in one deal. These are the regular plant. Let's put it in the one deal. Let's add levels to that and say, okay, you got to be 21 to buy this. You got to be 25 maybe to buy that. And go, guys, I don't think they can do what you're talking about anytime soon.
We can't put a list of no's because by the time we get it codified, there's 20 new molecules that we.
That's what I'm trying to say.
address.
Colorado
Do
did
that,
something.
Colorado.
Yeah, let John talk about
So we figured that how can we hedge against these bad actors kind of coming up with new synthetic cannabinoids and all that. So what we started out by doing is making a list of here's the ones that we think are acceptable and here's the ones that we definitely are out, like the HHCs, that type of thing.
Because to me, we need to keep it simple. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere.
In order to get a new cannabinoid on that, you have to petition. You have to show data, and then it can be added to that acceptance list. So that accepted list. So that kind of prevents somebody from coming up with a new cannabinoid and putting that on the market because it's still illegal because it's not on the accepted list. That is a very awkward way of regulating all this, but it's the only way that we could come up with. And the interesting thing, about our 50-state federalist democracy, I always thought that one of these frameworks from one of these states would kind of would end up having the critical mass that all the other states would adopt it. That's not happened at all. Every state has completely different frameworks. So there's no shortage of examples that you can pick from as, different frameworks to fit whatever kind of, need case you want. So there's plenty of that out there, I think, that you can build off of.
So you don't think that would work at all as far as...
I think I like the Colorado model because it is simple, and the phytocannabinoids are the thumbs up. You can use them. The things they need, and this is on the hemp side, not the marijuana side. Highly intoxicating, definitely synthetic known, or the definitely not list.
Yeah.
Anything else, you have to ask the state permission first.
Yeah, I think starting there would be simple. And then you can even add a lid of how much you want to put in there on the age limit. Okay, over 21, you can get this and whatever. Under,
But is it enforced?
Baby aspirin, but
yeah, that's exactly right. And keep it simple.
Yeah, it was funny because the marijuana side was obviously very much against anything hemp. But once it came to semi-synthetics, meaning it's actually in the plant, but it's not in, a large enough quantity to extract. So the best examples are like CBN, THCV, CBC. These are non-intoxicating cannabinoids that people are putting into their gummies that are showing efficacy for different uses, but they're converted from CBD. So marijuana finds out about that. They're all using hemp-derived minor cannabinoids too. And all of a sudden it became this, all right, how do we ban the conversion except for these ones? And that's how you end up with a framework like that. So is it the best? It's what we had to work with, and we thought it was pretty good, but I hope we can come up with better in the future.
It's very, what needs to happen, frankly, is they need to get the chemists in the room, people
Yeah.
like Chris, because they're asking, us, how do we define synthetic? Well, which definition would you like? I can pick from 30. It's very difficult.
It is. It is, and I had some other lobbyists tried to tell me I was wrong about something and what synthetic was. And part of the answer I had to them is ultimately what is synthetic is going to be what the legislature puts in a bill. And that's what we're going to live with. And the question is, or the trick is, get people like Chris and some trustworthy scientists in front of them to explain common language on the science side. It's important that statutes reflect how people use language in the real world. I think I've already complained here about how stupid it is. We call dispensaries satellite locations, and that our medical cannabis program is still a low THC program, wink, wink, when it's not anymore with what's available in it. That's not helpful. It's politically what we're stuck with the current leadership. But there are plenty of people in the legislature who, like Representative Darby and Senator Johnson, who are here, who really want to get it right. And they want to understand it, but they have such limited time available. So the more we collectively can bring them good data and good information, then we'll get good legislation in return.
He's worried about 31 big shots. After fuel self-feed.
True, absolutely.
7-1, it ain't go up.
But they get enforced.
Yeah, the San Angelo Cowboys like to drink beer. But it is, and let's talk about the alcohol analogy. A difference is the alcohol industry's worked out its kinks. And I asked Thomas Graham, the head of TABC, one day, do y'all still ever bust bootleggers? Because in their offices, they have really cool old pictures of bust from the 30s and 40s and 20s. And he was like, nah, it just doesn't happen anymore because the supply chains are there. Consumers who want it can get it almost anywhere in Texas, although I'm old enough to remember dry and wet counties and making the run to Gladewater at the last minute to buy beer. Yeah. And, you know, and Pinky's was almost a dirty place to go because you could buy liquor there. But cannabis still has to work that out. There's not the trust in the industry that there is with the alcohol industry, even though it is a far more dangerous product for your body and your mind over time.
There's also
good cannabis.
There's also a more robust regulatory agency staffed with hundreds of inspectors who are at those. I represent a lot of alcohol distributors and breweries and et cetera. And TABC is in those places a lot more than you're seeing dishes. You might see dishes. I have manufacturers who've seen them once in 6 years. They're going to see TABC probably 20 plus times within a given year.
And the other piece
they'll
of it is
fight.
the alcohol lobby, the wholesale beer distributors, the package stores. They've been around forever. Their members are politically engaged. In any given legislative race, some beer distributor is an important donor. And in some ways, they have less political power than they did in the 80s or 90s. I mean, the beer distributors used to be an 800-pound gorilla as a political force at the Capitol. They're not as influential now, but they're still very influential. And the members all know them and are connected to them.
With that,
Exactly. Sure. Absolutely.
say is you need to write something down as for sale. Look at all.
Yeah. Well, absolutely.
I believe that's a cop out sometimes.
But it is, and Texas has now accomplished that with the emergency rules. And in terms of keeping it simple, if any of y'all ever set foot in the Capitol or go talk to your members in the district, which I highly encourage, the best tool is a 1-pager in 6th grade English. And it's not because they're dumb and can't absorb much, though some of them are. It's because they drink from fire hoses of information. And the more we bullet down, the better. And one thing I did to prepare for testimony this session, thinking about all the acronyms of different chemical compounds, and just people glaze over by the time you've said CBD and THC. And John helped me come up with this idea. I made the simplest chart I could think of to help them understand what's naturally occurring, what's just popped up on the market the last few years that isn't commonly found in the plant, what's intoxicating, what's not. And it helped them follow the testimony for the rest of the day to have that reference tool.
But it's important to note, a hemp operator then got up there and pretty much called you a liar and said this You know, that's
he
inaccurate.
did, and he got his throat ripped out by a member who trusted my word.
Yeah, and that doesn't reflect well on the hemp industry whatsoever when this is all occurring right in front of the legislator at a hearing, and we wonder why, you know, we ended up in a situation where they were threatening to take it all away. I'll say it once, I'll say it 100 times. I'm a big proponent. This industry needs to take some accountability for itself. And it's not like I'm sitting up here preaching as you know, the primary person who represents Teacup. I own my own hemp beverage company. I'm a participant
you're on
in
both
the
sides.
market. It goes for me too.
More ideas from you guys. What should the legislature be doing? Nick,
I have
they disbanded it. There absolutely needs to be, and this is going to take legislation, a standing advisory council to the state that has the agencies need a seat at the table, law enforcement a seat at the table. We need a lab guy. We need a doctor. We need a shop owner, all sitting down and having honest, open conversations with each other about the hard problems. And what DPS had was called a working group and not an advisory council, kind of put that in quotes. The reason they did that is working groups don't have to meet in public. And which rubbed some people the wrong way. Oh my God, they have a secret committee. But it was helpful in that we could speak openly and, sorry, I'm following my thought. And the staff would, to some degree, spoke more openly to us than they would have if Karen Brooks and Stephen from the Tribune had been sitting there watching them. And often the government works that way. There may be a public advisory council or 5. HHSC and DISHS has a ton of advisory councils, but then they also will break into working groups to dig into more detailed issues.
So I wanted to, John, you had mentioned bad actors, most of the bad actors coming out of Texas, North Carolina, and Florida. And I guess when you answered the last question, it kind of sparked a little idea in me about, wondering how Colorado does, as far as I understand it's regulated, but from other states who are well regulated, are you exporting to other states these kinds of products? And I think this is probably something, and using that data of knowing that these 3 states are the highest contents of bad actors, and clearly they are not getting stuff right with making, Florida has medical, but not recreational. So I think that's where it's coming from. So it is pointing to, we need to regulate this instead of ban it. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that as a talking point?
I'm absolutely against banning this. I'd be clear, all the people that not only because the mission of trying to actually bring cannabis and make it acceptable and rescheduling and everything that goes with it, breaking down that stigma, but also I've worked with these people for 7 years. I owe my career to these, employees that I've worked with forever. I don't want to see them all lose their job. So I have all the reasons in the world to want something like that, but again, we only have so much money to deploy. I'm stuck with Texas, Colorado, and that's it. And then we rely on some of our other good actors in the industry to take different states from there. Results are mixed, but for a company like ours, especially because we're publicly listed, we have to follow those laws. So we're watching one state after another basically cut off sales, and that's hurting us. Meanwhile, the bad actors will just take our market share because they'll keep shipping into whatever state. So I don't know how you get to that level playing field. You get enough regulation, you get enforcement, but then you also need the interstate enforcement too.
For the market share to be and I could would call them CCP and things like that. Could possibly danger. Is there a make partnership going to that in states where they have access to?
In Colorado, no, because we have dispensaries everywhere, and I can go get all of that right there and be fairly certain that all the right testing has been done. These people will have their license pulled if they do the wrong thing. So there's trust there. And then also the costs. It's honestly cheaper for me to go over there and buy real flower than it is to try to find some smoke shop that's still selling this stuff. So Colorado, I feel like is a pretty good example, but we have an outlet for it too. You don't have that in Texas.
Yeah, the hemp products, intoxicating hemp products exploded in the South, where we have no other alternative. Yeah. Yes, if the phrase I use during session is people have to have a place to go. Because we had some conversations about we're trying to open up teacup while we're clamping down on hemp, and you heard the journalists talk about the bait and switch that happened in the House. A lot of the members who voted for the ban did it on the promise that teacup was going to be fully opened up, and then, as he so eloquently puts it, Patrick takes the hostage and then shoots them anyway.
He yanked the rug out from us nearly every session. Nearly every legislative session, I try to draft in patient protections. I try to draft in some employment and workplace protections, some different qualifying conditions within teacup. I'm a big advocate for, we are one of the only states in the nation that has a medical program, A, run by law enforcement, but B, that doesn't have a catch-all within the statutory language that states that the physician who is sitting in front of the patient and is most familiar with that patient's history is best suited to make a determination as to whether they require cannabis as either an adjunctive or palliative therapy. We don't have that. Every other state has, for any qualifying condition that the physician deems necessary. You know who picks what conditions you can get medical cannabis here? Your state senators and representatives who did not go to medical school, 9 times out of 10 don't really know the foggiest thing about this, and fight vehemently for every step of teacup expansion that we are able to get. Our lieutenant governor is notoriously hostile to this program as well.
Well, with that, we are close to time. So I want to thank each of you for being here and speakers. We've had some outstanding speakers. It's really an honor and a privilege to be able to set the table for all of us to come together to have these meaningful conversations as we move forward through the rest of this year and into 2027 and beyond. We have a lot to look forward to, thinking about the big picture. There are bumps in the road along the way. But the future is bright for cannabis in Texas, and I appreciate all of you for being here at the Texas Cannabis Policy Conference. Thank you so much.
Thanks.